This is the unfiltered truth about entrepreneurship. Raw, no BS, no sugarcoating. Welcome to Entrepreneur Intel. I'm your host, Wes Matthews. Each episode, we'll learn from experienced founders and uncover the top 5% learnings that led to their success in all things personal, family, and business. This show is sponsored by Stealth Consulting, delivering clear marketing strategies, ROI, and no surprises. Today's guest, I am really excited today. This is a founder whose brain I'm super eager to pick, a talented entrepreneur who has founded and grown multiple businesses. First one's YPO qualified. We got to talk about that. And that's over $100 million in revenue, and several EO qualified businesses, which are over $1 million in revenue. He's someone who helps business owners do more, TEDx speaker, host of the Profit Tool Belt podcast, and owner of the Profit Tool Belt, Dominic Rubino. Welcome.
Hey, Wes. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm good. I'm glad to be on your show. You were on mine, and you tore it up there. You gave a great interview. I hope I can return the favor.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the time. Love your background.
Thank you.
But I got to start first with the question I ask everybody. Here at Entrepreneur Intel, we're all about sharing knowledge that we picked up along the way. I just gave a nice meaty intro about you, so excited to dive in and tear that apart a little bit. But I'd love to hear how you started the journey, but what's the one thing that made you become an entrepreneur as opposed to like the traditional 9 to 5?
Yeah, I probably like a lot of people, it wasn't one thing. It was a combination of things. But for me, it started way back in high school. And the first thing I remember is we had to do this fundraiser for school. And everybody got given a bunch of boxes of all sorts of licorice. You know, those like multicolored, multi-layered licorice things?
Yeah.
And the teacher's like, go sell these. We got to raise money for the school. So I'm like, okay. So I just went and knocked on doors and I sold everything. And I came back the next day or not the next day, when we had to tell the teacher. And she's like, okay, who sold theirs? I'm like, I did. And everybody else was like, yeah, I didn't want to do it. Or one kid's mom ate all of his. But I didn't know up until then. I don't even care. I'll walk up to a door and knock on it and just start talking to people. So that was one of the places that it started for me. I realized, hey, I can go make things happen on my own. And I also, at the same time, got really frustrated by hearing people say, oh, nothing will work. I can't make this work for me. I'm like, I'm going to do it on my own. So I just always had that little switch in my head.
So is sales your thing, or operations, or
sales,
all of it, or sales?
Yeah, sales, which is scary because when you go, through high school and college saying I'm going to be in sales, other people sort of
everybody's like, yeah, great.
No, everybody's like, oh, I want to be a pharmacist or an engineer or a nurse. What are you doing being in sales?
Get a real job.
Get a real job. Yeah.
So you push against that though. Like, did you go to school through that? So you went to school.
You ready for you ready? Don't sip your coffee. Okay. You drink your water. I'll wait till you swallow before I tell you. I did go to college. I'm a forensic anthropologist.
What does that mean?
Yeah. Right. Nothing. Doesn't. So you go where the breadcrumbs take you, right?
Yeah.
So I started to get really good marks in archaeology. And so I kept taking archaeology courses, which is an arts degree. And then eventually, by the time you get to fourth year, I'm a forensic anthropologist. So recently deceased human skeletal remains was my specialty.
Wow. What led you down that path?
I just kept getting good marks. I really found it interesting. I like archaeology because I love hunting and fishing. And so archaeology, obviously, in large part is a study of ancient civilizations. You can go any direction you want. But I really enjoyed that. And then it just led off into, other stuff. Yeah.
So you go from forensic archaeology to a YPO qualifying business.
Yeah.
Which is unreal. So talk a little bit about that. So YPO is from an entrepreneurial perspective, YPO is kind of, from my perspective, one of the largest organizations out there in terms of revenue for entrepreneurs.
There's
EO, right? EO qualified to $1 million, but YPO is huge, right? You mentioned
you got to be doing $100
million. What type of business was that?
It was a mail order pharmacy. And so we sold I'm in Canada. We sold mail order medications from Canada to the United States. And really it came about because I had left the corporate world and went into selling used stuff on eBay. Crazy. Like used calculators and LED games. I don't know if you're old enough, Wes, but do you remember like ColecoVision head-to-head football?
Oh yeah.
The LED lights.
Oh yeah.
All that stuff. So they were a big collector item, but you'd buy them at a garage sale or flea market or something for $1. but I could sell them for $40 US. The conversion rate at the time was kind of as it is today, 1.3, 1.4. So it was big money, but really hard to inventory and store and forecast sales. And so I eventually morphed that business into selling used books, which is a story on its own. And then the books led itself to some food products. The food products led itself to over-the-counter medications. Over-the-counter led itself to pharmacy. And that's where it took off. And I built that to 120 million in sales.
Wow.
And then I sold it.
What year did you start that venture?
Oh, way back. So this actually all started because of business coaching, which started in 2000. So I probably started this in 2001. The pharmacy probably started in 2004 or 5, and then I sold it 4 years later.
So forensic archaeology to online pharmacy.
When you say it back to me, it doesn't make any sense. You're like,
that's why I keep saying it.
Yeah.
To pharmacy in Canada, right?
I'm not a pharmacist, by the way. I'm a businessman.
So you're a drug dealer in Canada.
Drug dealer, yeah.
So you've got online sales of pharmaceutical drugs. Like what led you down that path? I mean, did you have? Was it all kinds of drugs? Is it, people just go to the pharmacy and you fulfill all that, but it's just online?
That's actually a brilliant question, because most people wouldn't ask that. So what led me to that, and what kind of specialty inside pharmaceuticals? So, the easy one is, especially at the time, is everybody thought, oh, you sell Viagra. No, Viagra was really problematic for us. So what I wanted to do was create a business that we would have recurring revenues. That's always been a driver for me, is recurring revenues. And so we focused on maintenance medications. So for instance, if you have high cholesterol, you got high cholesterol. If, just say, somebody's in menopause, they're in menopause. There are multiple products and services we can provide to somebody who's got a chronic ongoing condition. And the second thing we did is we viewed a prescription as a pre-purchase order. We knew that there were 3 one fill and 2 refills. So we automatically, as long as we took care of that customer, we'd get those refills as well.
So what year did you sell that? You mentioned you sold that business. What year did you sell that business?
I almost have to go back and look on LinkedIn to see that. It was probably, I'm not kidding, probably somewhere around 2006 and 7.
Okay, so you ran it for about 7 years.
No, I ran it for 4 years.
4 years.
4 years. So 2000, let's say I started, the pharmacy started sometime around 2000, 2001. So 2005 or 6.
So math.
And then, as you know, Wes, selling it and completing the documentation when you sell a company are 2 completely different things. Like the day you walk out the door and the day the papers are signed are never the same day.
So did you buy this existing business, or did you grow this from 0 in 4 years to 120 million?
From Excel spreadsheet to 120 million in 4 years.
Wow. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Could you do it again right now?
Could I, or would I?
Could you? Like in the pharmacy world, or is that ship sailed?
No, I think that ship has sailed in that world. I mean, there's some opportunity still in optical. The problem is the supply, because you're not really able to get that level of supply from the main pharmaceutical supply houses to be able to do that kind of volume. Now, we were in Canada and we were selling tons of volume, but we were buying it through pharmacies after the pharmacies had already bought it. We weren't direct buyers of it. Even though we were a registered pharmacy, you have a quota for how much. In Canada, everything's on a quota. Okay. You can only have so much of something, right?
You had no background, like you went to school, forensic anthropology. You just have an entrepreneurial brain. Yeah. And you're like, hey, I'm going into pharmacy. So did you have to hire doctors, physicians, pharmacists?
Yeah, you have to. Yeah, in order to have a pharmacy, you have to have a pharmacist on the board. So we brought a pharmacist on the board, but the pharmacist on the board was just a pharmacist on the board. They really didn't have any operational knowledge. Now, the pharmacist thought they were a business person, but they were not a business person at all. The pharmaceutical oversight committee, they were a special breed as well, because they'd never seen an animal like us. Like we had a facility. Think of a warehouse with a big U-shaped conveyor belt, and pharmacists were taking the orders and filling the orders. Pharmacy assistants were helping them, and it was just going from one side of the warehouse to the other. So when they walked in, they'd never seen anything like that. The minimum square footage for our pharmacy, I think, was 600 or 800 square feet. Had to have a raised dais and a sink. And we didn't have any of those. We had a sink, but it was the bathroom. We didn't have a raised dais. They were freaking out. So I had to create my own form to walk them through and say, this is a legitimate pharmacy.
So I'm no mathematician, but I'm not interviewing you on a beach right now, which means you have a sick disease, which is called entrepreneur, like
I
pure
have a sick
entrepreneurship.
chronic disease. Yeah.
So like you grew a company phenomenal within a very short time frame. I mean, that is an incredible accomplishment. But now you're hosting, coaching, consulting. Talk a little bit about the transition from selling. I mean, that from 0 to 4 years to
Yeah.
then exit a company back in 2006, 2007. Can you talk a little bit about, like, number one, why'd you sell it? Why didn't you go to a billion?
Mm,
Right? There's the question always people are like, why didn't you just go 10x? You're wearing a 10x shirt. Why didn't you just go 10x from there?
yeah.
Like, what led you to actually put a for sale sign and do a deal?
You got some really good questions here, Wes. So it was a family business.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Well, a whole bunch of people are nodding like you just did right there. So my cousin and I started that business. He's still my cousin, but we're no longer business partners. It's probably the best for my life if we don't talk any more than that.
Got it.
I can tell you this, though. Money's a magnifier. If you're a dick with no money, you're a bigger dick without money or with more money, right? So a dick is going to be a dick. You just, when you suddenly have money, you think that you rule the world, and that's not necessarily the case.
So do you think that the non-entrepreneurial is more of a dick? I feel like entrepreneurs are pretty humble. They're pretty, easygoing. If you line up 20 in a room, for the most part, everybody's pretty humble, pretty approachable.
Yeah, I mean, I think it varies. Like a lot of things, it varies. I find that when you deal with people who are really high level martial arts, whatever their martial arts specialty is, they're very chill because they're just like, bring it. What can you do to me?
Right.
Very chill. Entrepreneurs are all over the map. Some are high strung, some are more chill, some are mellow, some smoke weed every night and some don't. They're all over the map. But I think I've come to realize that I know how to start and build businesses. And that's a ballsy sentence. But it's just what I know how to do. And
it's what you know how to do.
I'm still trying to get better. I'm not great at it, but I'm pretty good and I'm going to keep working at it.
Yeah. 4 years to grow a company from Excel spreadsheet to 120 million over is pretty,
I know. It's crazy.
Pretty decent.
Yeah.
So did you take a break? Like, did you sell the company and like have this aha, like you're going to play golf and surf and do all these things for
I thought I was going to, and then I got bored. And so I bought another company.
How long after?
Well, it took a while because buying a business is hard. There's a lot of junk for sale.
Yeah.
And so I ended up buying a company kind of through somebody I knew. I ended up becoming partners with them. I have to say, though, back in 2000, what changed for me is I left corporate and I actually bought a business coaching franchise. And so that's where I started to learn the systems for business reinvention. So there's lots of different kinds of business coaches out there. And by the way, when I started business coaching, the two words didn't go together. Like it'd be like looking at something on your desk and calling it an Apple wrench. It's like, what the heck is that? So business coach was not even a word when I started. But I did learn the systems for business reinvention. So my specialty is repairing the plane while it's flying. That's the kind of business coaching I do. And so I took that and I applied it to this business that went from Excel spreadsheet to 120. And all I did was the simple stuff. I'm very, like, one thing I'm good at is keeping it simple. I don't like complexity at all.
What helped you with that? So I think as an entrepreneur, like that's a great point. Keep it simple, go back to basics. What helped you get there, right? I mean, coming from your college degree to like your entrepreneurial hat, did you read a lot of books? Did you have any mentors? Did you have any friends that were entrepreneurs? Or what made you say, like, let's keep it simple, like don't overcomplicate things early on?
First, I'm not a very complicated guy. I don't like people that use big words. I was when I was in corporate, which I was selling telecommunications. I was selling telecom for Sprint. And man, there's some big words and phrases in there. And I found that I did a much better job when I was selling telecom services if I just translated everything into normal person language. So we'd walk into a co-location facility, banks of servers and rows upon rows of servers. And I'd be taking some CEO like yourself through there who needed that critical infrastructure. And we'd have the systems engineer next to me and he'd just be going nuts because I would say to the Wes Matthews, you see those green lights? You see those red lights? And you'd go, yeah. I go, well, our job is to keep the green lights green. And that little red light just flashes as a test, but it never needs to go on. That's what we're really good at. And the SE next to me is losing his mind. He's like, that's not the explanation. I'm like, shut up. That's what he needs to hear. And that's what we do. He doesn't care about all the other things. So simplicity in sales to me just comes down to just get to the bare essence of something. Like, and that's hard. It takes discipline. I find it very hard to do, but I struggle to do it all the time.
Yeah, it's interesting. I heard something yesterday. I think it was yesterday. Jeff Bezos talked about why he came up with Amazon. And what I caught was he's like, really, Amazon was kind of easy. And I was sitting there listening, like, what? How is it easy? Like, but the reality was he's like, UPS, FedEx, and all that infrastructure was created already. And so was the internet. All I did was create something that utilized those infrastructures. And he was talking about how, his footprint to the world is he wants to do that for the future. But why I thought of that and why that came out of my mouth is he was saying something like back in 2000, business, coaching, like, you had to educate people on that was even a thing, right?
Yeah,
Which
it
is
wasn't
hard,
even a thing.
which is really hard.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about that journey. So you're talking 2000. I mean, I just graduated high school.
It's a turn of the century. Yeah.
It's a long time ago. But things were different, right? Internet was there, but not really a thing. Phones were just coming out. Like, I don't think the iPhone came out till 08, 09.
Oh, yeah, no, it was a while before that came
So you
out.
probably had a big old phone,
Flip
phone and
yeah.
a couple thousand a month. Like, how do you go out and start educating people now on this business coaching?
Well, the value proposition was different. You couldn't necessarily go in and talk about the same thing because people didn't know what a business coach was. So quite often, at least for me, I went out, we talked about increasing marketing or increasing sales, like getting more and better customers. Still the same outcomes, but they didn't know that it was called a business coach that would deliver that. And at the time, I actually specialized a lot in dentists and chiropractors, even though I love trade.
You niched down?
I did niche. I did. Okay. I tried to niche as much as I could. But again, niching I found it much more difficult at the time because the distribution of my marketing was, you're just trying to hit a local market. Now, as you know, one of my podcasts is called Cabinet Maker Profit System. Like, come on, man, that's pretty niche. I always make the joke, it's not as niche as left-handed vegan cabinet maker profit system, but it's pretty niche, right? But at the time, I'm working out of a city, and I can only drive so far to meet people face-to-face because there was no Zoom. What was the other? There was no Skype at the time. And so you've got this natural market that I could serve. Nobody's going to do telephone coaching. That was already hard enough to do it face-to-face. So really, you're talking about a direct mail strategy, something I could do inside a couple of zip codes. So it's much harder to niche back then.
So thinking back, I mean, has that industry completely flipped upside down from what you can remember?
Coaching?
Yeah. Just on how you approached it.
It has and it hasn't. I mean, now the podcasts really helped me a ton, but you could still do the same thing. Pick any town and you could niche down and decide to just work with dentists or chiropractors or insurance agents, whatever you want. But I love contracting. It's my kitchen. It's the kitchen table I grew up at. It's all my uncles. It's my family. You know why I like contractors? Because they'll call me on my BS and I get to call them on theirs.
Yeah.
And it doesn't stop the conversation. They're just like, yeah, you're full of it. That's not going to work. Okay. And then 2 seconds later, nah, that's not going to work. They're like, okay. And then we just keep going.
I think what's nice too, I love contractors as well. And I don't like to wear a suit. And I feel like if you wear a suit around a contractor, that's just not good. So you go from forensic, I can't even think of the second word now.
Forensic anthropology. Yeah.
Forensic anthropology to pharmaceutical sales. And now you're in the business coaching world. Right. But now you have a flavor towards contractors.
Yeah. So after I sold the pharmacy, I was looking for another business to buy. And then I ended up buying actually a business coaching franchise. So I had the global rights to a business coaching concept. And our partner was a guy named Brian Tracy, who's a really well-known author, especially from the 80s and 90s. He's written a ton of books. Most of us have read.
Amazing author.
Yeah. And he's a great man as well. He's the same off stage as he is on stage. But I could tell you off stage, he's spicy. Like, you miss a number and we're going to talk about it.
Nice.
Not for an hour, for a day. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And I've missed many numbers with Brian, and we talked a lot about it. You take a beating. But he's a great guy, very wise, wonderful guy. So he was our brand partner. I had an operating partner. Anyways, I bought that business. It had 6 locations. And by the time I sold it, we had 237 around the globe. 237 franchise units.
And you started that in what year?
You got to go look at LinkedIn, man. right? Sometime around 2006. If I'm lying, if anybody's checking LinkedIn, I'm saying it first. I got to go check my LinkedIn background. I don't pay too much attention. I'm very
Well,
forward focused.
how many years did that run?
Oh, I was there for 13. It's still running.
So you went from 6 locations to 230 some locations in 6?
Yeah, 237.
And you sold that business, but it's still running today, or?
Oh yeah, it's still running today. Yeah. A lot of great people there.
So I see a trend.
I keep selling my businesses, or I keep growing my businesses.
You just like getting into new things?
I do. Well, yeah.
Yeah, like so that's I have to ask that question because you get the pharmacy to a point. I mean, that's buku bucks, right? I mean, there's a lot of entrepreneurs that they just want to qualify for EO, get to $1 million.
And they're scared. I'm going to call it right now. People get to a certain point and they're scared. They don't think they can go do it again. For some reason, I'm there switch in my head. I'll just go do it again. It's a lot of work, but I know that I can go do it again. If the business I'm in right now melts away, I'll just go do it again.
So with the franchise for the business coaching, did you just get bored, or like what now prompts you again? Is it just the close of the deal, the sale, the revenue from that, or is it just that you're kind of done and you have operators and you just get out of the way?
Yeah, it got to the point where it was time to part ways on that one. It got to that point, and we were really more in a maintenance mode than a growth mode. It was getting kind of boring. We had differences of opinions on the vision.
Got it.
That were significant, and I'm sat there and I stuck with it for quite a while before I'm like, I got to go. On top of that, I have to say I was traveling way too much for my family, and it was starting to affect my kids. And I don't need that. That's not why I'm here.
How many kids do you have?
2.
What are their ages?
Yeah. Well, right now they're 18 and 15. They're both super jocks. They're very active in sports, and there's a lot of travel involved in that. But that's different. Traveling with your kids for their sports is different than traveling for business, where I'm gone Monday to Thursday, X weeks a month.
And while you're doing all this, they're really young, right? I mean, they're young.
Yeah. I missed a whole bunch of events that most people really hold near and dear to their heart, like first steps, first swim lessons, first this, first that. Wasn't there. Getting home late for birthdays. I never wanted to be that dad, and I was that dad. And I just didn't like it anymore.
So what's the reflection now, like being 18, 15? I'm fascinated. So to me, an entrepreneur, personal, family, business, they're all tied together. People that say, oh, how do you balance them? Like, they all bleed together to me. I have 5 kids ranging from 15 to 1. So it's a super important question to me because I think entrepreneurs, they all have a different perspective. Or I have some entrepreneurial friends that just like grind away, badge of honor. I worked 150 hours this week. I have some that are like, I haven't gone to the office and shit, I forget where my office is.
Yeah. Yeah.
So to me, I always love that question, or like, how do you balance that? And then there's always a good reflection point of, because I always think you can always do better or worse with anything.
Yeah.
And when in reflection, it's like, how do you,
I think it's I try to focus on the quality that I have with the kids. So when I'm with my kids and my wife, I'm present. I'm not working. When I'm working, I'm working.
You're working.
I'm working. But when I'm not working, I'm not working. But when I'm working, I'm working. And everybody knows that. It's taken a while for us to get that solved. But if there's a day where I'm working from home and I'm in the office, nobody bugs me because they just know Dad's working. But when I come out, then it's especially when they're little, it's jump on daddy time, and bring it. Jump on daddy time. I love it. I live for that. Well, it's gone now because 15-year-old will kill me.
He'd crush you, kill you. Probably.
He'd crush me.
What about like do you leave your phone behind? Do you leave your phone in your office? Do you completely disconnect?
No, but I don't. If I didn't have to use my cell phone ever again, I'd be fine.
Yeah.
Because I come from an era before it. I find myself using Instagram too much. Even at 20 minutes a day, if I use the cell phone for like social media stuff, 20 minutes 3 times a day, I've just burned an hour of unproductive time. I just into the ether. It went nowhere. And I struggle with that. I got to get better at it. But
yeah, for sure. It's crazy. Is social media good for your business? Do you use it as a tool for your business at all? Or is it more just like scrolling pictures and stuff?
Dude, great questions. Yeah, no, that is actually a really difficult razor's edge because I need it for my business because I'm a content creator for the construction and contracting space. We have to add lots of value to I call them our customers. They're not even our customers at that point. We're just adding value to our audience. And then when they're ready, they'll ask us questions. And if they like, they can work with us. But I have to create quality content. So yeah, that's the struggle. Sometimes I got to have the phone because that's, I'll shoot a video on there or do something. and I need to do more.
So talk about what led you into the podcast now. I mean, we're doing a podcast now. I believe in the medium. I think they're
Yeah.
great. But
Yeah.
you niche specifically with home service contractors, correct me.
Contractors. So
Contractors, sorry.
it splits between commercial and residential, and there are
Okay.
there's some differences from a business coach or an operating perspective on commercial versus residential. But if somebody's in a sub trade, so they're not the builder, they're not the general contractor, but they're a sub trade,
Okay.
then I work with them. So they might be a home renovator on the residential side, they might be a home painter or a roofer or do driveway, repairs or installations. On the commercial side, they can be almost all the same things, but just commercial. Yeah.
So with the podcast, like why go that route? Like why that megaphone for that type of crowd? At first blush, without thinking I would be like, are they listening? How do they find it? Go find them at a bar. Like, I'm just curious what led you to the podcast medium.
I'm going to give you a business coach answer. It comes down to my values. So let me go back to why I sold the last company. Traveling too much. I'm sitting at the kitchen table one night.
Yep.
I said to my wife, some franchisees offered to buy the business. And we said no, because we weren't ready to sell. Came home that night, and my wife, we're sitting around the table having dinner. My wife says, "Hey, how was work?" I'm like, "Oh, pretty good. Somebody offered to buy the business today." She's like, "Oh, no way. You're going to sell?" I'm like, "Nah, I don't think we're ready to sell." My wife is sitting to my right, and my son is sitting next to her. And I just launched into a normal talk. So, hey, listen, honey, I'm going to be going down to San Diego next week for, the better part of a week and a bit. And, but you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to leave Monday after the kids go to bed, and I'll come back Thursday after the kids go to bed. So I'm here for the weekend. Nobody will even know I'm gone. And my son just shrunk in his skin. He didn't say anything. He just deflated. And I thought, Rubino, what the fuck are you doing? What the fuck are you actually doing? So I walked in the next day and I said, I'm selling.
Wow.
And so now you go back to why the podcast, because I'm a great public speaker. As a business coach and as a trainer of business coaches, I've been on stage for a long time all around the world. There's better speakers than me, don't get me wrong, but I'm pretty good at speaking. So I thought, well, how can I? That's the entrepreneur question that we learned from Michael Gerber. Start your question with how can I or what if? How can I use my public speaking skills to use a one-to-many approach to reach the audience I really want to reach, but I don't want to travel? So I'm okay to put as many limiters on the question as I can. That's fine. That'll cause me to be more creative. And that's where I got the answer: podcast. So I started two.
So what has the podcast done? So I'm asking this for other entrepreneurs, right? There's so much out. I mean, if you go on the World Wide Web, if you will, and as an entrepreneur, you start to think like, how do I attract clients for the problems I'm trying to solve in the world, right? There's social. I mean, look, I come from digital marketing, so everybody always asks me. It's like my wife's a nurse, and like people be like, "Can you look at this rash?" Or they're texting her pictures. I'm like, "What the?" Anyway, so like I'm a digital marketer, so people are like, "Hey, how much should I invest in this, and how much should I invest in that?" I'm like, I don't know. Like, there's a lot of factors. Like, it depends, and I'm not trying to be vague, but just because it worked for John Smith Plumbing over there doesn't mean it's going to work for you over there. So, how are you able to use your medium? You said something I love, the one to many. Yeah, I love that, because I think there's the one-to-one, right? When you're talking to somebody, engaging and solving that one problem, but you're like, no, I'm the one to many. I'm using a stage. Yeah. How do you apply that to the home contractors?
Podcast. But I have to say, I'll go back to one of your questions, like, how did I choose podcast versus something else?
Yeah.
I don't matter, and you don't matter. The only people that matter in my business are my perfect customer and what matters to them. And so Wes, you could have an exact same podcast. No, sorry. You could approach exactly the same market as me in the office next to me and do only YouTube, and you would have a business just as big and growing as mine. And then you might be able to do the same thing on Twitter. I've got a really good friend that does a ton of his stuff on Twitter. And I'm like, how the hell do you do anything on Twitter? But he's on Twitter and he's got a great business. So all of these different channels, there's different consumers, there's different tradespeople who only follow Twitter or only follow YouTube. And I've got the guys that listen to podcasts. But that's a very narrow funnel mouth.
And what are they learning? Are you talking like business strategy? Are you talking basic fundamentals, getting them
Yeah.
clients? Like what's the
I brought a
draw?
different voice to the contracting industry because I'm just about, well, you and I are both EO members,
Yep.
right? So I had an EO qualifying business, but I never joined EO because I didn't like the chapter just wasn't for me. I like the scrappy entrepreneur startup. So I joined EO, and I've been an EO member for years and years. But in EO, we talk about the business of business. And that's what I talk about on the show. It's the business of the contracting business. If you want to stop, if you're happy being a contractor running a few crews, that's fine. But if you want to be a business person who happens to be a contractor, I'm your show, because it's about the business of the contracting business. Totally different thing.
Do you feel most contractors sort of, they go work for a company, they're really good at what they do, they get sick of their boss, and they're like, F it, I'm going to start my own company? Is that where a lot of the home contractors start, or do they start with the business in mind and kind of build that way?
Yeah. There's one exception to that rule, which is the closet industry. A lot of business people get into the closet industry, whereas a lot of cabinet makers don't go into cabinet makers are cabinet makers, but they don't go into closets. But otherwise, most of them are technicians. They came through the tools. They were a mason, they're an electrician, they're an HVAC guy, then they got a truck, or a van. They got a couple vans. Now they run an HVAC company. To a lesser extent, it's a family business, although that's starting to happen more, multi-generational businesses. So people come at it from a number of different ways, but usually as a technician who realize, hey, I'm good on the tools, but this business part, I need, I don't want to say help, because they don't need help. They need guidance. They need somebody beside them going, no, watch out. That's going to be a bump. Let's go over here. They're strong people, very internally driven. So the trade doesn't matter. People think, it has to be one specific trade. No, I'm looking for people that are internally driven and just need to have that channeled and focused in one area.
So you've got the podcast going with the home contractors. What is the ultimate goal with that, right? You have a lot of listeners, one to many.
Yeah.
And then what? What happens?
Let
me rephrase that. Yeah. So are you...
What's the business model?
Yeah, individuals, they get to a point where they're like, man, I really like what this guy's saying. I'm ready to take that next step. Like, what's that smoking gun on your podcast? Because that's your marketing.
Yeah.
That finally gets them over the line. Is it listening to you for so long and then they're like, man, this guy really knows what
they just get waterboarded and they're like, I better just call this guy. Yeah. Well, so the CTA, or the point of the podcast is to get clients.
Yes.
But the point of that is to help people. We're just here to help people. So I'm growing my coaching practice. I've got my team is growing. We've got coaches who help me deliver coaching. We use a system specifically for contractors on how to turn things around. But I have to say, it falls in themes, right? Like there's time and time management, there's people, there's money, and then there's growth strategy and exit strategy. So those are basic themes, and inside of those fit sales and marketing.
So contractors are tough. So are you ever hit with the objection, like, what if this doesn't work? I'm going to pay you a bunch of money, and like, what's your biggest objections you get from home contractors after you engage with them? I'm just curious.
So some people will say, what if this doesn't work? But I think the bigger objection is, what if I can't make it work? And so it's an internal objection. Like, I've seen other people do it, but it's not me. You don't know my town. This part of Cincinnati is so small, it's not going to work. Or I'm in the deep south, or I'm in Canada, it doesn't work. You can't get it out of your head. That's the limiting belief that we have to overcome. This will work if you decide you want it to work. And, obviously we've seen it work many times over.
So you're a crazy successful entrepreneur. Like, what are some things you do? Again, I like to go back to personal, family, business. How do you take time for yourself? Like, you have a family, you have 2 young kids. Well, oldish kids now. I guess.
I know.
Like, how do you keep going? How do you recharge your batteries? You mentioned you're married.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I love fishing and hunting. Love it. So I like to lead a life of discipline as much as I can. So in the morning, I get up, go to the gym. I go to a group class, like a CrossFit gym.
Okay.
And although as I get older, I scale so much, I modify so much, man. It's not funny. But I get a lot of energy there. I get energy from the chirping in the morning. And then the reason I go to 6 a.m. classes, and if they had a 5 a.m., I'd go to that. But the reason I do that is my family doesn't know I'm gone.
Got it.
right? Because I can't, if I go after work, I'm taking from family. It's the same reason I can't go to like a massage therapist because I feel like I'm getting something recreational and taking from my family. It's just a weird thing. So I go before anybody knows I'm even out of the house. And then I try to be home right after work, and then I'm daddy time.
That's great. I love how you think, because I think the same way. I mean, you could probably buy a couple massage parlors and just have them come to your house. And
yeah, that means something different where I live, by the way. Massage clinics. We should probably. Yeah, I'm not in that business anymore.
So I read something about TEDx.
Yeah.
How did you get on TEDx? I mean, I think that's one of those entrepreneurial things, right? Of like, how do you get on TEDx? What did you talk about? Was it worth the time, the value? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, geez, I don't know where to start. I'll tell you what, it was the hardest work for 15 minutes I've done in my life. I prepped for a year to do a 15-minute speech, and I would have been happier with 3 talking points and a 5-minute warning. But they wanted me, I had to be down to the breath. I had to be down to the breath, like just so focused. So I practiced for a year on that. But that was the transition between selling and starting the other company, starting the business. I needed to do something after I sold the franchise. And so I thought, well, this will consume some time. So I went and applied to do a TED talk. That's kind of it.
I skipped around, but I want to go back to your hunting and fishing. What kind of fishing you do? Like, is it fly fishing, regular fishing?
Well, yeah. I mean, I like to do fly fishing, but I suck at it. Although, you know what? I organize a buddy trip every year. And so there's 4 of us, and each year we choose a different place to go. Last year we were in Venice, Louisiana, but no, 2 years ago we were in Venice, Louisiana, but last year we went bone fishing in Molokai. That was awesome. That was great.
You go with other fellow EO people, or?
No, these are buddies. They're all other presidents and CEOs, but they're just buddies. Nice. So I like all kinds of fishing, to be honest. And I say I like all kinds of hunting, but I don't do enough upland game bird or duck hunting. I just don't have, I don't have a dog. So it's kind of limiting, but I do a lot of big game hunting, Western style, big game hunting.
It's awesome. Sounds awesome.
Yeah.
So going forward, you have the podcast, and then is it a new style of coaching? Is it a continuation of the business coaching you were doing? Or if a painter engages with you, they listen to your podcast, what happens? What happens from that point?
So the coaching model that we use is obviously an evolution over time, right? So I love using strategic planning systems. When I built the pharmacy, we used Vern Harnish's model, which is, deeply embedded in EO, Mastering the Rockefeller Habits. Yeah, now called Scaling Up.
Yep.
So you've got that was the evolution. When I did it was called Mastering the Rockefeller Habits. Then he wrote Scaling Up. But by that point, I had also switched to starting to learn more about EOS, or the traction system. And so I'm not I don't follow in lockstep with EOS model, but the EOS model is part of the base of one of the tools we use for the strategic planning. And then on top of that are a whole bunch of contractor tools for pricing, for profit margins, for managing people. There's all other sorts of tools we add in there. And so it's a blend of coaching and a little bit of directed consulting, but mostly it's on the coaching side. Because sometimes I'm not going to tell a guy, hey, if you were to build the perfect form for estimating profitably, how would you build that?
Right.
He's going to punch me in the face. What I'd rather do is say, here's a form. It's a worksheet. Tell me what you'd fix. And a guy can work with that. But I can't do some loosey, open-ended question and hope he's going to get value.
I think it goes back to what you said a little bit earlier. I think for me, a big takeaway from your share, it's keeping it simple. I read Scaling Up and I'm like, this is great. But putting it next to EOS, I'm like, EOS is 1 + 1 is 2. Yeah. Scaling Up to me was a little bit more complicated. Seemed like from an organizational perspective, you would have to have maybe
more infrastructure.
More infrastructure,
a bigger company. It's a bigger company thing. Yeah. I think I would imagine you get to a point where EOS doesn't work. Like at the upper end of EOS, you need some more detail. But I love EOS for its simplicity. They're all the same concepts, by the way. Neither of those two gentlemen, and I hold them in very high regard. Yes. Both of those guys. But they haven't reinvented anything. Neither have I. We're just repurposing things we've seen in the past and making them better.
R&D, right?
All right, rip off and redeploy.
So with that being said, so you're talking about scaling up, traction. What helped you along the way with this crazy growth? I mean, that's just massive growth. So you're the content king now, you said. You have to digest content.
Yeah.
Like, what are you reading? What do you do? Are you audiobooks? Are you reading
Yeah, I'm
frequently?
audiobooks and podcasts a lot.
All business stuff?
I find it hard to read now because I'm
Yeah.
used to audiobooks. No, not all business books. I listen to Freakonomics podcast is one of my favorite.
Freakonomics.
There's a guy, Terry O'Reilly, that does a couple of marketing podcasts. I like strategy. So, there's a book I've probably read more than almost any other book, which is The Art of War by Sun Tzu. You want a crazy surprise?
Yes.
This book, most people would blow past and never pay it any attention. And it's crazy. It's called The Greatest Salesman in the World by Og Mandino.
Greatest
It's old,
salesman in
man.
the world.
Yeah, it's written in like 1968. If you buy it at a used bookstore, it'll cost you 25 cents. And you'll think,
And how much value is in that book?
it's incredible. It is incredible. And, I don't know when this is going to go live, but if anybody has a shred of faith, it doesn't matter what faith, in your background, in your personal background, read that book and you'll get goosebumps.
Awesome.
Surprise goosebumps.
That's great.
Surprise goosebumps, I will say. That's a great mindset book, by the way. Totally 100% underrated.
So it's not just sales stuff. People see that.
No, and see, that's the problem with the title is somebody looks at it and goes,
Yeah.
the greatest salesman in the world. So I'll challenge anybody that wants to read that book, change it and say the greatest business person in the world. Change it and say the greatest solar panel distribution company in the world. Change the word salesman to anything you want. The greatest private nursing clinic in the world. And you'll get every ounce of value you needed in the world out of that book.
Well, happy day for me. I just got my Audible credit for the month, and I now know what I'm buying.
It's old school, man. It's old, but it doesn't take, just because something's old doesn't mean the value diminishes. The E-Myth Revisited has stood the test of time. Kiyosaki's book, The Rich Dad, Poor Dad, stands the test of time. You don't need the newest book to get the best ideas.
So a question I like to ask, like, what's holding your attention now, or like, what's the future, right? You got this coaching business, you got the podcast. We could probably go down a massive rabbit hole with AI, but what's sort of next for you, right? Or like, what's consuming your thoughts and your focus?
You're going to laugh. Simplifying my business.
Okay.
Yeah, because we're going through a massive growth phase right now. Okay. I'm bringing on coaches. I need to bring on more coaches because the podcast is getting much more popular. I also need to be able to scale the quality. So, I'm actively looking for coaches to bring onto the team, but I can't, it's not just everybody. It's not a cattle call. I have some very specific filters that our coaches have to go through for who they are before they show up, and then the onboarding, and then the training, and then the support. And I did that for years at the franchise company, right? So I'll be doing that here. So we need to simplify the business and scale it.
Who's a great candidate? Somebody listening might be like, oh, I like that. Like what qualities are, a lot of my entrepreneurial friends, they've either sold a company. I think everybody at some point, they want to consult. But I think for me as an entrepreneur, you have to have a framework or something behind you to be able to effectively consult. And from my perspective, a lot of entrepreneurs, their idea, their strategy, but they lack process and systems. Sounds like you have that built out. So like, what's a great candidate for you that could be a good consultant?
Well, a great candidate for me would have some sort of coaching background, and to me, coaching means that even if I know the answer, I've got enough ego to set it aside and ask the question instead. Because getting the person on the other side to come to their own realization is really important. That's coaching. So I'm not here to just tell people, or it's not a stage to, put your own ego out there. You got to really want to help people and let them learn, let them go through a bit of pain. On top of that, I'd love to have anybody who's a contractor who sold their contracting business, or if they did franchise support for a home services business. Yeah. There's a ton of great people that come out of College Pro Painters or the O2E brands. And then, and a coaching background. If they got a coaching background, but aren't really nailing it with the marketing, then, you'd find a good place on my team because I'm going to hand you clients, but you're going to have to provide quality.
Oh, that's great. We've already been chatting now for 45 minutes. It seems like we've been talking for only a couple minutes, but Dominic, how can people contact you, or if they're interested in the coaching or just want to connect with you? I mean, you're a wealth of knowledge. I think in my journey personally as an entrepreneur, I've been at it for a decade and a half, and guys like you don't pop up all the time, right? I mean, what you've been able to do is a huge. I mean, as an entrepreneur, it's great to know people like you. So if people have questions or comments or want to explore actually becoming a a coach, what's the easiest way for them to connect with you?
Well, first, I mean, thank you, Wes. I appreciate the compliment. I really do, because I think I lose sight of. To me, it's just normal. That's just what we're going to do today, right? But it's I lose sight of that. I'm easy to find. If you can't find me, you ain't looking, is what I like to say. So find me on LinkedIn. Dominic Rubino, spelled just like you think an Italian guy spells his name. I'm not the college wrestler kid. Definitely not that guy. But I'm the other Dominic Rubino. And then I've got the 2 podcasts, right? One's called Profit Tool Belt, and the other one is Cabinet Maker Profit System. I've got articles on Forbes magazine. Like, you can find me in a couple of different places, but just LinkedIn's probably a good start.
That's great. We'll add all that in the show notes. What's these? Is it like Apple Podcast or YouTube, or what's
anywhere you get them, and anywhere. On YouTube. Yeah, I need to do a better job on YouTube. We've got some serious plans for 2024 on YouTube, but you can find me on all those platforms.
Well, Dominic, thank you so much for coming on. I learned a ton today.
Yeah,
about you and just your successful entrepreneurial journey. So thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, let me plug you too, because you were on my show. You were on the Profit Tool Belt podcast, and we talked about if there's a market shift with the economy, what do I need to do from a marketing perspective? So if anybody wants to listen to Wes instead of me,
hey,
you should hear him there.
Not as cool, but
yeah, cooler.
But hey, well, thank you. So to the audience, if you learned something today, please tell somebody about this podcast. Again, thank you, Dominic. This has been another episode of Entrepreneur Intel. Thanks so much. This has been another episode of Entrepreneur Intel. Thank you for joining us. For show notes or other episodes, please visit us at entrepreneurintel.com. Until next time.